Welcome to this session where we're going to tackle a question that's been circulating in endurance circles. Does beta-alanine actually help your endurance, or is it just a buzzword from strength training? You've probably heard of this supplement from lifters and sprinters, but most distance athletes dismiss it outright. In this talk, we'll unpack the physiology behind beta-alanine, explore when it might make a difference, and share some surprising data you may not have seen before. Many runners and cyclists assume beta-alanine is only for gym rats. They figure that if you're not chasing a bench press record, there's no reason to bother with it. The reality is more nuanced. Beta-alanine isn't a magic bullet for endurance, but in the right circumstances, it can make those final surges feel just a bit easier. Over the next few minutes, we'll separate the myths from the mechanics and show you what the research actually says. The common expectation is straightforward. Endurance athletes don't need beta-alanine. After all, long races are about pacing, fuel, and oxygen, not muscle acidity. The reality is that while it won't transform a marathon, beta-alanine can be helpful in specific moments, like sprinting up a hill or kicking hard in the last kilometer. Think of it as a tool for those short, intense bursts inside a longer event, rather than a broad endurance enhancer. Beta-alanine is a naturally occurring amino acid, but its real value comes from what it forms inside your muscles. When beta-alanine combines with histidine, you get carnosine, a dipeptide that acts as a buffer. Carnosine can mop up excess hydrogen ions and facilitate calcium exchange, helping your muscle fibers contract efficiently under stress. Taking roughly 3 to 6 grams per day for at least 4 weeks can raise muscle carnosine concentrations by somewhere around 30 to 60%. That increase doesn't happen overnight, but once your muscles are loaded, they're better prepared to handle acid buildup. During hard intervals or steep climbs, your muscles rely on anaerobic glycolysis, which churns out hydrogen ions along with lactate. Those hydrogen ions make your muscle environment more acidic, slowing down energy production and making each contraction feel harder. Carnosine's imidazole ring has a pKa around 6.8, which means it readily accepts those hydrogen ions. The result is a slower drop in pH and a delay in that burning fatigue. Higher carnosine levels therefore help you sustain power in efforts lasting roughly 1 to 4 minutes. Here's where most people get it wrong. Beta-alanine isn't something you sprinkle into a shake once. To raise muscle carnosine meaningfully, you need to take around 3 to 6 grams every day, broken into smaller servings. A month of consistent dosing can push carnosine up by roughly 30 to 60%, and about 10 weeks can get you near 80% saturation. Single doses above about 800 milligrams often cause that harmless tingling known as paresthesia, so splitting your intake or using sustained-release capsules keeps discomfort down while still building your stores. When researchers look at beta-alanine, they see the biggest gains in bouts lasting between about 60 and 240 seconds. That's the window where hydrogen ion accumulation is high enough for buffering to matter. In those events, you might see performance improvements on the order of 2 to 3%, sometimes a bit more or a bit less depending on the athlete. There's little to no benefit for all-out efforts under a minute, and while there are small improvements in longer tests, the effect shrinks as the duration climbs. It's important to appreciate how endurance events work. Once you settle into a steady pace, your muscles primarily draw on aerobic metabolism. Fatigue comes from things like depleted glycogen, impaired oxygen delivery, and dehydration, rather than a flood of acid. Beta-alanine targets that acid buildup seen in glycolytic bursts. In a steady-state marathon or long ride, that pathway barely comes into play. That's why beta-alanine isn't considered a cornerstone of endurance training, even though it plays a role at higher intensities. If you graph performance benefits against event duration, the pattern is clear. The tallest bars are in the 1 to 4 minute range, representing short climbs, mid-distance track races, or strong finishes. The bar for efforts under a minute is essentially flat, and the bars for events over 4 minutes slope downward. That doesn't mean beta-alanine never helps in longer efforts, but the return on investment diminishes as you move into purely aerobic territory. Steady-state events simply don't create the acidic environment. Beta-alanine is designed to buffer. When you're running at marathon pace, you're burning fuel with oxygen, and hydrogen ion accumulation stays low. Your limiting factors are how well you deliver oxygen to working muscles and how much carbohydrate you've stored. There have been very few studies on beta-alanine in events longer than about 25 minutes, and the existing data show inconsistent or minimal effects. In other words, it won't rescue your marathon time if nutrition and pacing aren't already dialed in. So where does it shine? Think about those decisive moments when the pace surges or the grade kicks up. A hard charge to the line, a push over a hill, or repeated accelerations in a criterium all rely on anaerobic power. Interval workouts that leave you gasping also involve substantial acid buildup. In these contexts, having extra carnosine in your muscles can allow you to maintain a higher output for slightly longer, which may be enough to make a pass or stay in a breakaway. One study that often comes up looked at a 10-kilometer running time trial. Participants took around 5 grams of beta-alanine per day, paired with resistant starch, for about 3 weeks. On average, they shaved nearly 3 minutes off their 10-kilometer times and finished with lower blood lactate levels than those taking a placebo. While it's just one trial with trained adults, it suggests beta-alanine's buffering can matter even in events lasting half an hour, especially when there are intense surges during the run. Other research looks at how long you can hold on during incremental tests. An adolescent runner, 4 weeks of supplementation improved time to exhaustion by roughly 6.5%, compared with about 1% in a placebo group, without raising maximal oxygen uptake. High-intensity cycling studies report total work increases of around 13% versus 2% for controls and time to exhaustion gains of about 12% versus 1.5% in adult women. A month of beta-alanine improved cycling time to exhaustion by roughly 2.5%. The common thread is that athletes can push a bit longer at high intensities even when their aerobic capacity doesn't change. Not every trial comes back positive. Several studies show no improvement in short trail runs, repeated 5-second sprints or longer treadmill tests around 40 minutes. Some find modest benefits for 800-meter track races and repeated sprint protocols. This variability likely reflects differences in how hard the tests were, the athlete's training status, and how long the supplementation period lasted. That's why it's important to view beta-alanine as a context-dependent aid, not a universal fix. Beyond race day, beta-alanine may influence how you train. By buffering acid in your muscles, it can make high-intensity intervals feel slightly more manageable, allowing you to accumulate more work. In some high-intensity interval studies, athletes taking beta-alanine saw greater increases in maximal oxygen uptake and total work performed, compared with those doing the same workouts without it. Longer sessions at higher power outputs can drive better adaptations, so even a small buffering effect might pay off over weeks of training. When you stack beta-alanine against other endurance aids, its place becomes clearer. Carbohydrates provide the primary fuel, caffeine sharpens your nervous system and pushes perceived effort down, and nitrates widen blood vessels to enhance oxygen delivery. Those three have robust evidence for endurance performance. Beta-alanine, by contrast, acts as an intracellular buffer, and its benefits are modest and situation-specific. It's a fourth-tier option once your fueling and stimulant strategies are already in place. If you decide beta-alanine fits your needs, dosing consistency is crucial. Take between 3 and 6 grams each day. Split into 2 to 4 servings to minimize tingling. Start at least 4 weeks before a race or event if you want carnosine levels to be fully elevated, and continue through your training block to maintain those stores. If the tingling bothers you, reduce the size of each dose or choose a sustained release formula. Remember, the absence of tingling doesn't mean the supplement isn't working. Carnosine builds silently over time. Let's talk about the return on investment. Bulk beta-alanine powder is relatively inexpensive, typically costing around $10 to $20 per month. The expected performance gain, however, is modest, often around 2 to 3% during high-intensity segments. When you compare that to the larger gains from proper carbohydrate loading, caffeine use, or nitrate supplementation, beta-alanine's ROI is lower. It's worth considering only if you're looking for marginal gains and willing to commit to the loading protocol. Competitive endurance athletes who face repeated surges are prime candidates. Think cyclists who have to respond to attacks, triathletes who need a strong final kick, or runners who train with structured intervals. Sports like cross-country skiing or rowing that blend sustained effort with bursts of power may also see some benefit. In these scenarios, buffering the acid load during hard efforts can give you just enough extra capacity to stay competitive. If your training is mostly easy mileage and your races are long and steady, beta-alanine is unlikely to move the needle. Marathoners and ultra runners rarely experience the kind of acid buildup that beta-alanine targets. Likewise, athletes who are already using proven aids like carbohydrates, caffeine, and nitrates effectively may find the additional cost and complexity unjustified. In these cases, focusing on fueling, pacing, and recovery will yield bigger returns. Before you add beta-alanine to your routine, ask yourself 4 questions. Does your event include surges, sprints, or hills where acid buildup matters? Are you already maximizing carbohydrate intake, caffeine use, and nitrate supplementation? Will you commit to 4 to 8 weeks of daily dosing to saturate your muscles? And finally, is a 2 to 3% improvement worth the cost and effort? If you can confidently answer yes to those questions, beta-alanine might be worth a try. In the end, beta-alanine is not an essential endurance supplement. It's a situational tool that can give you an edge during high-intensity segments embedded in longer events. To get that edge, you need to take between 3 and 6 grams every day for at least 4 weeks, and keep dosing through your training. Weigh the modest benefit against your budget and the effort involved. And remember that carbohydrates, caffeine, and nitrates usually offer more bang for your buck. Let's wrap things up with the big points. Consistent beta-alanine supplementation boosts muscle carnosine by roughly 30 to 60% when you take it at the right dose. The clearest performance benefits occur in efforts lasting 1 to 4 minutes, yielding improvements of roughly 2 to 3%. It has little impact on steady-state endurance but can make a difference during sprint finishes and surges. Use it strategically, commit to the protocol, and don't neglect the basics of carbohydrates, caffeine, and nitrates. When used with a purpose, beta-alanine can be a valuable but modest addition to an endurance athlete's toolkit.